Here's a survey conducted by UCLA, and this survey, according to this survey, 99.6% of university teachers believe that critical thinking is a very important or essential goal for graduate education. That's obviously true, but one thing is say that is to say that it's very important, and another is to develop appropriate teaching strategies for teaching it in the classroom, which is where the problems come. Why? Because there are lots of different issues that can be investigated, such as, for instance, whether or not critical thinking should be taught as an independent subject on its own, or whether it should be combined, with other subjects. Another critical issue is what are the contents, the most important topics to analyze: deduction, induction, logical fallacies. How useful are lessons in formal logic or Venn diagrams? So how important is to draw, for instance, diagrams of your argument? How should we go about designing a curriculum? These are all very important questions when trying to put together a module of critical thinking. Surely I cannot answer all these questions now, but what I will do is to review a couple of papers that are very important and that can give some teaching tips and advice for teachers to develop these critical thinking skills in students. And next, I'm going to review this paper from Tim van Gelder. Tim van Gelder is an Australian philosopher. He was very active in the late 90s, beginning of 2000, in the field of philosophy of mind. He is one of the proponents of distributed cognition. He had a lot of exchanges with Chris Eliasmith, a neuroscientist, and Bill Bechtel, who is a famous philosopher of science. Nowadays, he is I think he's no longer, well, he's a philosopher, but he is no longer in academia. He has his own company, a software engineering company, of which he is CEO. So I guess he understood that there's not much more in academia. He preferred to switch to the other side. And, well, still he retains a lot of interest in philosophy. But nevertheless, this paper is quite good, so I think we should look at it. I think it's been circulated, probably read by Daria. In any way, I'm going to review the key points now. So, according to Van Gelder, there are 7 or 8, I don't remember, I think 7 points, teaching tips that we could follow when teaching critical thinking to students. But the first of this is to be aware that critical thinking is not something that can be taught overnight. So it takes time, and so it invites teachers to not be discouraged by slow progress. Like I said before, for you students, critical thinking is more of a lifetime journey than something you pick up in a 2 or 4 or 6 weeks modules. So that's a very important thing to start with. The second thing that he says, it's related to the practice component of critical thinking. So point 2 and 3 are related to that part that we already talked about. And he says that students should practice critical thinking. They have to engage in critical thinking themselves during the classroom, not just study the principles or observe it in action. So the key idea is for teachers to make sure that you develop some activities that are friendly enough for students to be carried out so that they can develop these critical thinking skills. And also have students practice transfer. So that means essentially have your students practice carrying a particular general critical thinking procedure or task over into many different domains or contexts. For example, vital critical thinking skills is that of anticipating objections to your position. So when discussing an argument, have your students, he says, consider their position on a range of different issues, and on each topic try to identify objection. Then go on and ask your students to identify objection to their position in a range of different situations. When they write an essay, when answering questions in class, when they are engaged in some kind of dispute in class or out of the class. The fourth element, the fourth teaching tips that Van Gelder mentions, goes back to the theory component that we discussed. And so it invites teachers, of course, to look at explicitly at the theoretical aspects of critical thinking. The important thing is that students understand the theory, can pick up the relevant vocabulary, and can see how the theory relates to what they are doing in other contexts. For example, you might consider spending a class on the distinction between evidential reasons, which are reasons, of course, that support evidence, provide evidence for a certain claim, and explanatory reasons, which are reasons that don't explain why that claim came about, but just provide sort of a story about it. So that's a good way to, for instance, to look into the theoretical aspects of critical thinking. And all there is to look, for instance, I would say, at the distinction between induction and deduction, and how strengths and weaknesses of both. There is huge debate in philosophy of science on this, as you are aware. Then the fifth part is, it goes back to the attitude component, the fifth tip, student. And it's all about, he says, encouraging students to counter belief preservation. And how do you do this? Well, a way to do this is to play the devil's advocate, arguing the case against their own position. Or, better, actually having them participate in structured debates in which they're either arguing the case against the case they previously thought was correct, or at least must anticipate and respond to objection to their case. We'll discuss this in more detail in seminar 2, I think, or 3. Another aspect that he says that he says is important, and I believe it's very important, and it's often underlooked even in the Western world, is this one: to have students regularly draw diagrams of their argument. Because why diagrams? Because diagrams allow students to see at a glance how the argument flows from the premises to the conclusion. So if there are problems in the argument, they can easily spot them and fix the argument and its contents. So this is very important. This, in fact, will force them to seek clarity in the argument, and egoistically, it helps you because it allows, if you have 100 students, it allows you to assess them at a glance more easily, because you can first look at the structure of the argument and so have an idea what you can expect from the essay. So this is a win-win situation both for teachers and students, I would say. And finally, another interesting tips that he says we should be doing is, teachers should be doing, is to try as much as possible to decouple critical thinking from extrinsic rewards. Now, of course, in university or school settings this is almost impossible because we need to assess, mark, evaluate students, but try as much as you can to develop some sort of activities that the students can enjoy for themselves without the need of, essentially of an external corroboration or of a mark or a reward. And he says to take the computer game as a model. Computer games are successful, and he's right in this, largely because they set challenges for the users, offering no other reward than the satisfaction of better performance. So when you teach students critical thinking, you should be trying at least to have some activities that follow this sort of spirit. Okay, so this is the main tips that Van Gelder suggests